So education in the state government of the state of Washington is one of the things that we spend the most money on. Nearly 2/3 of our budget, I think, is spent on education. So it's really important that we understand, why are we spending those dollars? How are those dollars being spent? Are we using them the best that we can? One of the things that I did when I first got into office was I decided that since we spend so much money on education, I better know what the heck's going on in the schools in my district. So I took it upon myself to go visit all of the schools, the elementary, the high schools, the middle schools, and I nearly visited all of them in the first 2 to 3 years that I was in office. And what I found was happy and sad. The happy thing I found was that teachers were really engaged with students and there was good learning going on in every district I went to. The bad things I saw were dilapidated buildings, ceiling tiles falling down, really kind of crappy situations for kids to be learning in. I have learned a lot about education by participating in the caucus and talking with other folks in my caucus that are leaders on education. We have several folks in the legislature that are either currently teachers or they come from the school boards or retired teachers even. So we have a pretty good amount of knowledge of what really needs to happen to help students succeed. The legislature passed what we call the Education Reform Act. It updated the definition of basic education that we have in our state constitution. So what happened after that was, unfortunately, an economic downturn. No one would have ever thought that we would have to cut the way we had to cut. And everyone was hurting. We had, the highest amount of unemployment we'd had in more than 2 decades. It was not a time that we could raise taxes on our people. We cut in DSHS, we cut in mental health, we cut in prisons, we cut in parks, we cut in schools. And then the McCleary decision on top of that made us realize that as we come out of this recession, that education has to be our top priority. This last year, we were told by the state Supreme Court that we weren't making enough progress on the McCleary decision. So in the House, we started looking at tax exemptions that we have for business that are currently on the books. There are hundreds of them, literally, and we started combing through them, trying to find which ones we didn't think were maybe working for the state of Washington anymore. The lottery money, we came up with an innovative way to bond that money to be able to help us to build classrooms all across the state. And the side effect of that is also create 7,000 new jobs, which we could really use. And then additionally, we funded the teacher COLA pay raises. Like I said, the teachers haven't had a pay raise in cost of living adjustment in 6 years. But when it came to negotiating with the Senate, there was no desire on their part to even negotiate at all on some of those things, particularly on the tax loophole closures. They in fact wanted to create 25 new tax loopholes. They didn't want to give teachers a COLA, and they refused to negotiate a capital budget and the bill that we negotiated in a bipartisan fashion. That bill that came out of the House for classrooms all across the state only had a handful of no votes, so it was hugely bipartisan. And why not? Who would want to build classrooms in your state to help the reason we wanted those classrooms is to decrease class sizes and to implement all-day kindergarten. It just didn't have to be this way. It could have been better. We could be doing a lot more for kids. and we could have made a lot more progress on McCleary. I worry now that the burden is going to be so great that we have to meet in 2 years, that I worry about that tax burden and how we're going to have to come up with that money. You know, where are we going to cut? Are we going to have to cut from other social services? Are we going to have to reinstate some of these taxes that are very regressive to the middle class and the working class to meet our McCleary obligation? I don't want to do that. And if we had spent a little more time and been a little more, had a little bit more negotiation in regards to this particular budget that we had in 2014, I don't think we'd be looking at a contempt of court issue right now.
To those people here in the 28th whose primary issue is education, why should they vote for you or not vote for Steve O'Ban?
Well, first off, experience. I mean, I think that if you remember in 2012 when Steve was running, he was talking about, whoa, when I get in office, I'll fully fund education. Well, he hasn't. Secondly, this dilemma that we're in fully funding education is not going to come without some compromise and some negotiating, which I believe I have a much better ability to do because of the relationships that I have and the experience that I have working with both political parties. I also just think I have a firmer understanding of this overall state budget, having been on Ways and Means for 4 years. I also have a firm belief in public schools. My kids went to public schools, my grandchildren are in public schools. I think that our public education system is the great equalizer for folks, and that every kid deserves a quality education. You know, I stand for the middle class, the working class, and that is really how we keep a strong middle class and working class, is having our children be educated so that they can do the jobs of the future.